All right, welcome back to the new music. Now, traditionally, when you hear artists talk about the black experience in America, it's usually in the genres of hip-hop or R&B, right? Well, how about this? Imagine the black experience through the eyes of a punk rock and hardcore kid. Imagine being a minority amongst the minorities. Well, such is the case for James Spooner. He's an American kid who grew up in the whole punk and hardcore scene, and he was black, and it was definitely a different experience. So he documented it in his new film called Afro-Punk.
Punk rock is nothing but a hybrid of rock and roll, which you, of course, created.
Punk is black music.
Like punk rock is black music.
A lot of kids get into punk because they feel like ostracized, you know, and this is supposed to be a safe space for like the freaks or whatever, you know. It would make sense that for a lot of black kids who maybe they're one of the few black kids at the school or whatever, they're already the freaks, so they're going to gravitate towards punk.
No longer do I have to listen to some brothers come up and say, oh man, you just playing that white boy shit. I'm like, man, listen to the bad brains, mother.
Someone was like, hey, you gotta hear this bad brains, you know? And I got these 2 live albums, neither one of them had pictures, you know? So I was really into it, and then someone was like, yo, those are all black guys. And I was like, what? Yeah. These don't sound like black guys, you know, like whatever.
When you're going through that, did you feel connected to, you know, your black culture at the time? And did this involvement in this community kind of keep you away from that?
Yeah, I definitely struggled with the black community because I had this affinity towards this loud, obnoxious music and was dealing with identity stuff. I was like the kid who had to be the punkest kid around, and I went and got myself a mohawk, and I, you know, did all this stuff.
When I was a kid, I was convinced that white people were cool. Being black was like, I remember being all upset, like, I want to be white.
I was living in California when I first got into the scene, and a lot of the black kids that went to my school were either in gangs or emulated kids that were in gangs. And, you know, I had a couple who befriended me, and they were like, always like, yo, man, like, why aren't you a nigga like us? You know, like, why don't you join the Black Mafia, the Gangster Crips? And I was just like, look at me, I got a mohawk, I'm like in plaid pants with boots up to my knees, like, you really want me to roll with you guys, you know?
I would say that really, being black and being a punk rocker are pretty similar.
Is it the same thing as when you see white kids who are in their full hip-hop mode? You know, they've made a joke movie about it, like Malibu's Most Wanted. Is that the same thing?
I don't think so at all, because for white folks, I think it's more of an appropriation of culture.
I felt like that I totally didn't fit in with the white punk kids, you know what I'm saying? It's like I had to go out of my way to prove that I was punk to them.
I have to go like 9 times harder than the average person, or let's say a white person.
As a white person, you come and see the film, really just come at it with like, maybe what they're saying is real, and you know, like, wow, maybe my friend who's a black kid, I never even knew that this is how they were feeling, you know? Like, maybe we can talk about this or something, you know?
Yeah.
You know, I'll tell you, I saw Metallica, man, 1988, Maple Leaf Gardens on the Justice for All tour. It was so brilliant, but it was actually very important as well because it was the first time you can go to a rock show, well, since Motorhead, and see an audience that was really diverse. You're dealing with metalheads and punk rockers and skinheads and bikers all in the same room, but as well, the audience wasn't all white, and that was a big thing.
It is a big thing because when people think of rock music, they think of white dudes and bands, and that isn't the way it used to be.
No, man, Robert Johnson, Leadbelly, the beginning of the blues and rock and roll, and of course, Little Richard and Chuck Berry, who both are more likely to be the real king of rock and roll.
As opposed to who we all think of as the king of rock and roll, right? So on the Rock Show today on the New Music, we are looking at the black experience in rock music as it is today.
American music is black music.
It's always, wow, 4 black guys playing rock and roll. That's kind of interesting.
Black rock, that's no different than, you know, any other rock.
We just happen to be black, but man, we love rock music. Oh, yeah!
It's a fact of life that people look at music in terms of white music and black music when it's, to me, it's just, you know, music.
I totally didn't fit in with the white punk kids, you know what I'm saying? It's like I had to go out of my way to prove that I was punk to them.
I have to go like 9 times harder than the average person, or let's say a white person.
The brothers created rock and roll, so in the first place. Everything came from the brothers, man, don't you know?
Interpretation of rock today is always like Headbangers Ball, you know, gotta have the hardest guitar and let's do that Black Sabbath, you know, that type of thing. But I mean, really, if you look at the history of rock and roll, I mean, it was spawned from blues music.
You forget about Chuck Berry, Little Richard. Jimmy just revolutionized the sound of rock, and you ask any major rock or metal star out now that's got roots, they'll tell you that Jimi Hendrix was the man that brought it to them. There must be some kind of way out of here.
My generation, you know, they haven't heard of Tracy Chapman maybe. It's sad, but, you know, sometimes they don't know who Jimi Hendrix is.
Come in, suck it to me one more time again.
Jimi Hendrix was like a rock musician, and I'm sure he was accepted by all cultures because he was just so great at what he did. And then there's bands like Bad Brains and like Living Colour. People didn't really accept it because it wasn't really like what rock was supposed to be.
It's still kind of like white males are the center of rock. There's still this idea that a black rock hero of any gender is a freak.
In the long career that we've had, yeah, we've gone through all kinds of emotional ups and downs and changes, and that gets reflected in the music.
Let's have hoes fight.
It's all about defiance. That's what rock and roll is, you know, even defying what rock and roll is.
To me, it's all rock and roll. When I'm in the basement working on a hip hop beat, if it got a certain sound, so I'm like, this is rock and roll. I look back at Rodala like, yo, this is rock and roll. You're like, yup, that's rock.
Who's that? Cool cat, move back.
Hip hop was like, you know, that really evolved out of rock music. You know, that evolved out of sampling drums. You know, basically, you know, and
it's funny because rock and roll music came out of black music.
Yeah. In contemporary culture, the black rock musician appears to be an anomaly, when really and truthfully, if we understand the history of the music, the black rock musician is anything but an anomaly. In fact, the black rock musician is an innovator.
Much love to black rock. You know, I'm right there with you.